Good morning. Today we're looking at plant nutrients. Last video was about photosynthesis and what that actually entails, how plants make their own food. And today we're going to look at how plants actually um, use certain nutrients in the soils to facilitate things like photosynthesis and how they use the minerals and vitamins and things in the soil so that they can survive. So in your textbooks, it's from pages 130 to 142. And first of all, within the plant nutrients, we have things called macro elements and micro elements. So first of all, let's look at the macro elements. Macro meaning these are the type of elements or your things like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, minerals that the plants need in bulk. So they need a lot of these nutrients, otherwise they can't survive. Whereas your micronutrients, they do not need a lot of. So macro elements can be further divided into primary and secondary. So primary, obviously, first it's the most important, and secondary, it's second most important. So primary are things like nitrogen. So why is nitrogen so important? The rate of plant growth and the protein content inside of the plant is directly related to the availability of nitrogen in the soil. Okay, so yes, it builds amino acids, which is later on made into proteins, if you guys remember why we need nitrogen and amino acids for. So also they get nitrogen from the air. It makes up 80% of the air that we breathe, and the majority of crops require the addition of mineral nitrogen fertilizer to reach their yield potential, so they don't always get enough from the air. And if there isn't things like those bacteria that fixes the nitrogen close to the roots, then they need to get more nitrogen from fertilizers. Also, it is a significant component of nucleic acids, DNA, if you've heard of that before, the genetic material that allows cells to grow and reproduce. Okay, so essentially nitrogen is important for the growth of the plant. So what happens if there is a nitrogen deficiency in the soil, if there's not enough of this in the soil? What then happens is stunted growth or slow growth of the plants, and also it creates small leaves. The leaves can't develop properly. Also, the leaves will look dull colored and yellowish, and also small and poorly developed flowers and fruits if they started to develop. Okay, so yeah, it's very important for them to have nitrogen, and also important for a farmer to notice when there is a certain deficiency. What does the plant look like if it doesn't get enough nitrogen? Then secondly is phosphorus, also one of the primary macro elements. So phosphorus is essential for helping plants build a healthy root system, and its availability in the soil is highly affected by soil pH and temperature. So yes, the soil needs to be at a certain acidity or alkalinity, and also a certain temperature for there to be enough phosphorus in the soil. It gives the crops the energy required to extract other nutrients from the soil. Also, it helps to capture and transform the sun's energy into chemical energy, so it's needed during photosynthesis. And also it ensures optimal growth and maturity of crops. And also it's present in every living cell that is essential for the same way as water, oxygen, all crops grown for food. Okay, so phosphorus is needed also for the growth. You get the phosphorus usually from organic materials like your humus, and also from fertilizers and naturally in the soil as well. Then what happens? How does the farmer know there's a phosphorus deficiency in the soil? It's also when the plants aren't growing as good as they are, also when they are not as green as they should be, usually when the chlorophyll is there. So what also can happen is that older leaves, if there are older leaves, the new ones will be up top, and they could appear purple in color, because all of the phosphorus that were in the older leaves now goes to the younger leaves because the plant still wants to grow. So the younger leaves will appear more green, while the older ones may become purple or dull in color if there's a deficiency. Then thirdly, we have potassium. So it's instrumental in regulating the amount of water within crops and therefore enabling them to be drought resistant. So yes, it helps balance crop growth with nitrogen, also ensuring healthier crops. so nitrogen, nitrogen and also the potassium is important. They regulate together what happens inside all the system things that happens inside the plant. Interestingly, it also acts as an antifreeze agent and results in improved frost tolerance, so they can handle cold weather better. So yes, it's helpful in winter crops. Then also promotes high concentration of sugars in the cells, making fruit sweeter. As we can see here is it's not really a fruit, but a carrot. So it will be much sweeter if if enough potassium is inside the plant. And it's also crucial for high yielding crops. So you want to get a lot of fruit out of all these crops, fruit or vegetables out of all the crops. Okay, again, what happens if there is a deficiency in the soil, if the plant does not get enough potassium? So the leaves can also become brown and necrotic. So necrotic is when the leaves basically die down. And also all the leaves first show symptoms, and then same with phosphorus. The older leaves will look a bit bad, and the younger leaves might look still healthy because all of the potassium and the nutrients are going to the younger leaves because they're still growing. Okay, then we get to the macroelements that are secondary. They're secondarily important for the plants, such as calcium. So the most important is calcium develops healthy cell walls, so it gives structure to the plant. And if you can see here in the picture, if there is a deficiency, the plant is unable to grow new leaves, same on roots, and also basically the shape of the leaf will also fall down, because remember now the cells are not as healthy and thick as they should be, so the plant doesn't really have a form anymore. So yes, with calcium deficiency, poor leaf and root development, and also stunted growth, and new leaves can't form. Okay, so then with magnesium, the secondary macroelement, is important during photosynthesis because it is found within chlorophyll. So no magnesium, no chlorophyll. So what happens if there is a deficiency? As you can see in the picture here, leaves are yellow with green veins. So it starts to yellow and these brown spots start to form if there is a magnesium deficiency. Then lastly is sulfur, also one of the secondary macroelements. Sulfur reduces leaching of other nutrients to the environment, so it helps prevent the loss of minerals out of the soil. So also it plays an important role in photosynthesis and carb production, food production for the plant, and also as part of essential mustard oils helps as a natural protection against pathogens and pests also, and improves quality and taste of vegetables. Yes, so it's very beneficial for the plant. Then if there is a deficiency of sulfur in the soil, also decreased growth, all of these things, if there isn't enough minerals, the plant can't grow efficiently, so not a lot of growth going on. Also yellowing of leaves, which starts along the veins of the leaves. Also in the previous picture, the leaves becomes yellow, and also within the root system if there is a deficiency. So then let's go on to the micro elements. Again, micro elements, the plants do not need a lot of these elements or minerals. So a few examples is boron, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, zinc, and cobalt. Okay, so they only need minute traces of these in little quantities. So let's look at root development. Which ones are important for this? I'm just going to look at a few of them. So iron is important because it's the oxygen carrier of the legume root nodules at the bottom here. So it does give oxygen to the rest of the plant. And also zinc is important here for the early stage growth of the roots. So then looking at stem development, it needs something like zinc. So it's important for protein synthesis and also for growth regulation to ensure that the stem actually grows. Okay, the light's gone. Then for leaf development, what is important here is things like manganese and copper. So those two are also regulates chlorophyll formation, so they help form those pigments. They're essential for photosynthesis. Then with your fruit development, what's needed also zinc, yeah, zinc is actually needed for all of these processes of development or for the development in the plant. But zinc here is important for the formation of food in the fruit, and also boron for fruit, for the actual formation of the fruit and for sugar production and the maturity of the plant, for the fruit, sorry, for it to mature and become sweet and all those sugars within the fruit. Then for flower development, before the fruit starts to form, is molybdenum again for pollen formation, and also copper is important to prevent the wilting of the flowers, so it keeps the flowers alive. Then lastly, for seed development, after the fruit has done its job and seeds are now needed for the next generation, boron helps with the setting of the seed, so yeah, the formation of the seed, and also zinc for formation of the seed. Okay, moving on from the microelements. Then now we know all the different elements in the soil and the plant needs them, but how does the plant get it? How do they absorb all these nutrients from the soil and into their root system and stem and so on? Good. In the previous video, we talked about the two routes or the two pathways that water can take, how water enters into the root system of a plant through osmosis. The simplistic pathway or route is the simplest way for it to go, and it goes through the inside of the cells, in between the cells to the xylem vessels, and then the apoplastic pathway or route is through the membrane or through, it can also be through the root hair, but it takes along the side. It stays in the cell walls, from cell wall to cell wall until it reaches the xylem vessels. Okay, so when we get to plant nutrient uptake, there are two ways for it to go, either active or passive. If you remember, osmosis is a passive way for water to enter the plant because no energy is needed. But with nutrient uptake, yes, it can happen passively, but usually it's actively. So active meaning it needs energy. Okay, so if you take the cell, the outer membrane of the roots, okay, if this is the outer membrane, here it is also just represented in another way. These are your lipid cells. They form your cell membranes, and within these lipid cells or fat cells, you get these protein molecules called carrier molecules. They call that because they literally carry nutrients from the outside in through them to the inside of the plant. Yes, this would be the outside where all the water is and all the nutrients are, and it needs to go into and through the membrane to the inside of the plant. Same in this case. Okay, so this section here represents active transport because we use ATP, it's energy. So what happens here during active transport, the molecules are outside, they attach to this carrier molecule along with an energy piece. Remember, ATP is a chemical form of energy, so it also binds to this carrier molecule. And then as soon as the ATP binds here, this guy, the molecule, carrier molecule opens on this side and it deposits or puts the molecule, the mineral that was outside now on the inside of the plant. So let's say it was calcium. Calcium comes and binds, ATP binds, and it opens and it let calcium through and deposits calcium on the inside of the plant with energy. Okay, then on our passive transport side, passive, this side, no energy is needed. We have an example of diffusion here. So through the membrane, there is no protein tunnel, I want to say, that helps. It's just with all these within these fats, the molecules can literally just go through and on the inside of the plant, called diffusion. Then you have something called facilitated diffusion as well. Also still passive, no energy is needed. If these carrier molecules have like a tunnel inside, the molecule or the nutrients can literally just go through the tunnel and enter the plant. So no energy is needed. But it's when the carrier molecule, this carrier molecule looks different and it needs energy to open. So then it is active transport when energy is needed. Okay, so those are the two main ways how nutrients, molecules, food can enter the plant, or these, not really food, but these minerals, vitamins and things from the soil can enter into the plant. Then there are different forms of the nutrients that are taken up by the plant. So inside the soil, there are things like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and so on. So here they just give you the symbol of each of these elements, like you have studied, and then the form, the ionic form that the plant takes up the nutrients from the soil. So in the soil, carbon will be in the form of carbon dioxide. Hydrogen would be in the form of the hydrogen ion plus, so that's one less electron. Oxygen can be taken up in the forms of either carbon dioxide, water, or just oxygen. Okay, the same goes for nitrogen and all the rest. Sulfur usually in sulfates, the form of sulfates, sulfate ions. Then potassium. I'm reading at the same time. So potassium is normally bound to the soil colloids, as we saw in the previous video. Then if lime is added to the soil, and as soon as lime is added, it displaces all this potassium that was attached to the soil, and it leaves the soil, and then if it's in the surrounding area between the soil molecules and the root hairs, then it can be absorbed by the root hairs. If it's not adsorbed to any soil particles. If it's free in the soil, then it can be absorbed. Okay, so then phosphorus is usually taken up into the plant, with phosphorus here, along with calcium. So phosphorus and calcium usually go hand in hand. Okay, so then factors affecting nutrient ability. What factors contribute whether the plant can easily absorb these nutrients? So first of all, soil texture affects it. If the sand is very sandy, salty, then the water can just wash away all the nutrients, and so in that texture, the nutrients will struggle to be absorbed by the plant. In clay soils, again, there's a lot of water, so it can happen that in clay soils, the water holds on to the minerals, and it can also struggle to absorb. But it depends, again, also on the plant type and so on, because some plants love sandy soil, salty soil, or clay soil, and they don't struggle to absorb all of these nutrients anyway. So it depends on the plant, also on the soil's texture, whether there's going to be enough nutrients in the soil, and also if there's going to be organic matter. The more organic matter, the more cations and ions, there will be colloids in the soil. So the more there are, the more nutrients is available for the plant. Then also soil pH, acidic soils or alkalinic soils, whether that will enable the plant to absorb these nutrients, and also if the soil is too acidic. Just want to make double sure. If it's too acidic, then if you add lime, it makes it a bit more alkaline. Yes. So you can add lime to change the pH, always remember that, of the soil. So some plants don't like acidic soils, others don't like alkalinic soils, but you can change the pH to also ensure that the plants get enough nutrients, usually in between the 6 to 6.5 pH range. Or most plants take up or absorb nutrients very well. Okay, then we get to nutrient analysis, either of the soil or plants. Okay, so you want to know as a farmer how much of these different nutrients, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and so on, is in my soil, what type of plants can I grow there, and how much is being absorbed by plants. So researchers use machines like this guy, the atomic absorption spectrophotometer, and the inductively coupled plasma spectrometer. Don't worry, they're just two machines that is used by researchers to try and figure out how much phosphorus, how much potassium, how much of these minerals are inside a soil sample. Either a soil sample or within a plant, to see how much of what the plant actually absorbed and how much is inside the plant. So the first way of doing it is doing a soil analysis. You can either take samples of the soil and then send that to the researchers so they can find out how many nutrients or what type of nutrients are inside the soil itself. So we take samples, usually with augers. Here's an example of an auger. It's literally like a tube on the inside that enables the researcher to take a sample of soil. In this case, it's in the form of a tube. So it's this metal instrument that's placed inside the soil, really heavily dug into the soil or pushed into the soil, and then when you take it out of the soil, you get this pretty soil sample. And here are a couple more examples of the different types of soils that has been sampled. Most of them look a bit clayish, and this one looks a bit more humic, but yes, two different types of soil samples. So it's usually done with augers or these instruments taking your samples. Then we can also take plant samples for plant analysis to know how much of what nutrients have the plants actually been absorbing. Okay, so first of all, to remember, if we want to take or send samples to a research facility, firstly we need to do is sampling. So if we have a plant, here's an example of an alfalfa plant or a lucerne plant. If you want to take a sample, they usually say if you are not instructed on what to do, then you just take the upper part of the plant and break off a piece of the plant, because you still want the plant to still grow. So don't hack off or take all the roots. The analysis is fine with leaves and a bit of stem and flowers. So that's all that's needed. But depending on the type of test you want to do, maybe different pieces of the plant is needed. So in other cases, maybe they want to have the root. Okay, but essentially, usually, it's just the upper part of the plant. Then secondly, we need to clean the sample. So usually we have to wash off all the grit, soil, any molecules off or dirty molecules off of the plant. Just wash it, clean it. And then the third step would be to package it. But before we can package it, either in a plastic bag or in a paper envelope, we need to dry the plant. So this plant is being dried. Then if you guys know about the trick to put a piece of plant between or in a book between two pages, you close the book and you keep it inside the book for I don't know how long, a couple of weeks. And when you check it out again, it looks something like this. It seems pressed down, it's dried out, but the leaves haven't changed color, they stay green. So yes, you want to air dry basically the plant, stick it into a package, and then send it to the research facility where you want it to be analyzed. And then fourthly, you get results. So I'm not going into much detail about the results of it, but usually they then tell you how much zinc, sulfur, nitrogen, and so on is within that specific plant you want to test it. So then you know, okay, if you had a soil sample done and you know there is a lot of manganese in the soil, but this plant you sent in doesn't have enough manganese inside it, then it could be something like the pH of the soil is bad and you should get that tested, because maybe that hinders the absorption of the nutrients into the soil, into the plant, and so on. So it's always good to do a soil analysis and a plant analysis. But yes, that in a nutshell is basically what you can do to find out what's in the soil and if your plant is getting enough nutrients.